Picture the greatest golfer who ever lived, standing alone in a room full of people, and somehow, impossibly, looking small. That image has been haunting those who know Tiger Woods best, because the man they once described as iron-willed, obsessively independent, almost intimidatingly self-contained, has, according to multiple people within his closest circle, changed. Not in the way champions change when they find peace. Not in the way men change when they finally heal. But in a quieter, more unsettling way. A way that makes the people who love him exchange glances they don't know how to put into words. One source, someone who has spent years inside the professional orbit of Tiger Woods, recently said something that stopped a room cold. They said, "He doesn't feel like himself anymore. And what's worse, I don't think he even realizes it." Those words, that sentence, it landed like a stone dropped into still water, and the ripples have not stopped moving. Because this isn't just about golf. It isn't just about Vanessa Trump. It's about a man, perhaps the most scrutinized athlete who ever lived, who built his entire identity around control, and may now be losing it to someone else entirely. And the people who care about him most have no idea what to do. Before we go any further into this story, if you've ever watched someone you admire change in front of your eyes and felt powerless to stop it, subscribe to this channel. Because we tell the stories that other people aren't brave enough to touch. Tiger Woods has never been easy to know. That's not an accusation. It's almost an architectural fact about who he is. From the moment he stepped onto the world stage as a teenager, a prodigy in a sport that had never quite seen his face before, he understood instinctively that the world would try to consume him. So he built walls. Careful, precise, engineer-perfect walls. He controlled the information. He controlled the access. He controlled the narrative with the same terrifying focus he controlled a 5-iron from 210 yards. And for a long time, it worked. The mystique became part of the brand. Tiger said little, revealed less, and the world projected whatever it wanted onto the silence. Some saw a machine. Some saw a warrior monk. Some saw a wounded man hiding in plain sight. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. Whatever Tiger Woods was, he was the one deciding what that meant. Then came the years that broke him open. The affairs that rewrote his public image overnight. The divorce from Ellen Nordegren, a woman who, by most accounts, had genuinely loved him and genuinely deserved better. The injuries that seemed almost mythological in their persistence, as if the universe itself had decided this man had pushed hard enough and needed to be stopped. The DUI arrest that played on every screen in the country, his face vacant and unfocused in the dashcam footage. A version of Tiger nobody had ever been supposed to see. And yet, because this is Tiger, because defiance is woven into the marrow of who he is, he came back. Not once, but repeatedly. He hoisted trophies on surgically rebuilt knees. He cried on a golf course in Augusta in 2019, and an entire generation of sports fans cried with him. He reminded the world that whatever else he was or wasn't, the greatness was real. The ability to reach inside himself and find something no one else had. That was never a performance. But coming back from what Tiger has been through isn't just physical. And the people in his life, real people, not fans, not media analysts, will tell you quietly that the emotional reconstruction has been slower, messier, and far less complete than the public version of the story suggests. Which is exactly why, when Vanessa Trump entered the picture, the people closest to Tiger paid very close attention. Think about something for a moment. When someone who has been through profound personal destruction starts a new relationship, what are they looking for? Comfort, yes. Connection, absolutely. But sometimes, without even meaning to, people who have been broken in a particular way start looking for someone who will simply make the decisions. Someone strong enough, or certain enough, or loud enough to fill the silence they don't know how to sit with anymore. And sometimes, that can look a lot like love, while actually being something more complicated. Has that thought crossed your mind too, when you've seen someone you care about fall into a relationship that just doesn't feel right? Drop a comment. You might be more connected to this story than you think. Vanessa Trump is, by any measure, a compelling figure. She navigated a high-profile marriage to Donald Trump Jr., itself a circus of public pressures and family expectations, and emerged from it not diminished, but visibly emboldened. She is sharp. She is socially fluent. She operates in rooms where power is the primary currency, and she does it with a kind of effortless confidence that those around her consistently remark upon. She is not someone who shrinks. She is not someone who waits for permission. And in almost any other circumstance, those would be purely positive qualities. But the sources who have watched her relationship with Tiger develop describe a dynamic that gives them pause. Not because she is a bad person, that's not what anyone is saying, but because of how the balance appears to have shifted. Because of how Tiger, who once made every decision with obsessive autonomy, now seems to be operating within a framework that is increasingly not his. One former associate described attending a social event where Tiger and Vanessa were both present. He used to own every room he walked into. This person said, not aggressively, just through presence. You always knew Tiger was there. But at this event, he was secondary. He was orbiting her. And when she moved, he moved. I watched it for 20 minutes and I couldn't look away because it just didn't match anything I knew about him. Now, one event doesn't tell a whole story. People are complicated. Relationships are complicated. A man who has been publicly humiliated and physically shattered might genuinely want, for once in his life, to let someone else be the loudest thing in the room. That's not weakness. That could even be healing. But this wasn't one event. And one account hasn't been the only one surfacing. Multiple people, independently, without apparent coordination, have described similar observations. Tiger deferring in ways that feel out of character. Tiger going quiet when he would once have spoken. Tiger's inner circle, the small and deeply loyal group of people who have known him through the worst of everything, growing noticeably distant from his current life. Not because they were pushed out, or at least, not obviously, but because, as one of them put it doesn't feel like we're welcome in the same way anymore. That's a quiet sentence with a loud implication. Because Tiger Woods' inner circle is not a casual group of acquaintances. These are people who flew to his side after the accident, who sat with him through surgeries, who kept secrets that the tabloids would have paid fortunes for, not because they were obligated to, but because they genuinely loved him. When people like that start pulling back, it's worth asking why. And here is where the story gets genuinely uncomfortable, because it raises a question about power that we don't always want to confront. There is a particular kind of influence that doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive with red flags and warning signs. It arrives with attention and certainty and the specific electricity of someone who seems to truly see you. It arrives in the middle of exhaustion and pain, when your defenses are lowered not because you've gotten careless, but because you've simply run out of the energy to keep them up. And once it's inside the walls, once it's become the thing you organize your days around, it can be almost impossible to see clearly from the inside. The people who love Tiger are watching from the outside. And what they're describing isn't a man in danger in any dramatic, obvious sense. It's something subtler and in some ways more alarming. A man who seems to have handed the steering wheel to someone else, and either doesn't know it, or has decided it's worth it. If this story is moving something in you, if you've ever watched someone disappear slowly into someone else, this is the kind of content we make here. Your support on this video means we keep going. Let's talk about what we actually know publicly, because the foundation of this story matters. Tiger and Vanessa Trump first appeared together publicly in late 2023. The celebrity world took note immediately, because of course it did. Tiger Woods and a Trump. The political valence alone was enough to set off 1,000 think pieces. But beyond the politics, beyond the dynasty surnames and the paparazzi photographs, there were people watching the actual human being in those images, and what they noted was something more interesting than ideology. Tiger looked comfortable. Actually comfortable. Not the performance of comfort that he has perfected over decades of public life, but something that seemed more genuine. He smiled differently. He held himself differently. And for a moment, the people who'd been worried about him exhaled, because maybe this was it. Maybe after everything, he had found something real. But comfort and control are not the same thing. And as the months passed, some of those same observers began to notice that the comfort came with conditions. That Tiger's world, which had always been almost aggressively his own, was being reshaped in ways both visible and invisible. His public statements, never plentiful to begin with, became even rarer. His social appearances happened increasingly on Vanessa's terrain, at her events, surrounded by her people. The carefully curated distance he'd always maintained between his golf life and his private life began to blur in ways that made longtime insiders uneasy. Not because privacy is bad, but because the specific flavor of this changed privacy had a different quality than before. It felt less like Tiger protecting himself and more like Tiger being protected from something. Contained, rather than contained by choice. One golf industry figure, speaking anonymously, said something that has been difficult to shake. You have to understand, Tiger's whole thing, his whole psychology, has always been about being the one with the power. On the course, off the course, in his relationships. He is always the one driving. Always. And when you start to see that change, you start to wonder what he's getting in exchange. Because Tiger doesn't give up power for nothing. So what is he getting? That question matters more than it might seem. People who give up control, and this is a human truth that applies far beyond this specific story, often do so because they're trading it for something they've been desperately lacking. Safety, certainty, the relief of not having to make every decision alone. And for someone like Tiger Woods, who has carried the weight of his own mythology for literally his entire conscious life, the appeal of finally putting that weight down, letting someone else carry it, or pretend to carry it, is not hard to understand. The danger, of course, is that when the weight belongs to someone else, so does the direction. So does the destination. And for a man whose entire identity has been built around his own singular, almost terrifying sense of purpose, the destination has always been everything. Where is Tiger Woods trying to go right now? What does he want the last chapter of his competitive life to look like? Does the path he's currently on lead there? And most importantly, does he know the answers to any of these questions? Or has someone else quietly begun answering them for him? These are the questions that the people who love him are sitting with in private. And they're sitting with them quietly because raising them directly, saying them out loud, risks being seen as the enemy. Risks being the person who tried to come between Tiger Woods and his happiness, which is the last thing anyone who genuinely cares about him wants to be. That silence, too, is a kind of control. Not Vanessa's, not intentionally, perhaps not even consciously, but a silence born of not wanting to lose access entirely, not wanting to be the person Tiger cuts off, and so saying nothing, watching, and hoping that the man they know is still in there making his own choices. Here is what we don't know. We don't know what happens in private. We don't know what Tiger himself feels about any of this. We don't know whether he has looked at his life clearly and decided, with full awareness, that this is exactly what he wants. We don't know whether Vanessa Trump is the villain some are casting her as, or simply a strong woman who has been given an unfair narrative because she is unapologetically powerful in a world that still finds powerful women threatening, especially in proximity to legendary men. We don't know, and that matters, because certainty in a story like this would be dishonest. What we do know is that the people who have watched Tiger Woods most closely, through his rise, through his collapse, through his resurrection, are worried in a specific way. Not that he's miserable, not that he's in visible distress, but that the thing that made him Tiger, that precise, almost violent insistence on self-determination, seems to be quieter than it used to be. And they don't know whether that's peace finally finding a man who earned it the hard way, or whether something else is happening that he can't yet see clearly from where he's standing. There's a version of this story with a good ending. There's a version where Tiger Woods, stripped of so much by injury and time and his own past choices, found someone who made him feel less alone in the specific way that all the trophies and the history and the legacy never quite could. There's a version where what looks like deference from the outside is actually chosen vulnerability on the inside. A man brave enough to stop performing invulnerability and simply be loved. That version is possible. That version is worth hoping for. But the people speaking quietly, carefully, without wanting to cause harm, they're hoping someone is asking Tiger himself. Not his team, not his handlers, not the people whose access depends on not asking hard questions. But Tiger, whether he feels like himself, whether the decisions in his life feel like his, whether the silence he's living inside is the silence of peace, or the silence of someone who doesn't quite know how to find his voice anymore. Because here's the thing about men like Tiger Woods. The world watched him when he was winning. The world watched him when he was falling. The world watched him when he came back and cried with him and decided the story meant something larger than just golf. But the watching was always about what he could do, what he could produce, what performance he could deliver on the most pressure-saturated stages in sports. Almost nobody has ever just watched to see if he's okay. And in the end, underneath the majors, underneath the scandal, Underneath the surgeries and the comeback and the mythology that has calcified around him like a second skeleton, Tiger Woods is a person. A person who has been watched his whole life without ever really being seen. A person who has given an almost incomprehensible amount of himself to a world that often gave back performance and consumption in return for something that looked a lot like love, but wasn't quite. If Vanessa Trump gives him something real, something that holds him without requiring him to perform, then every insider concern in the world is secondary to that. Love, genuine and chosen and mutual, matters more than optics. But if what's happening is something else, if the control the insiders are whispering about is real, if the tiger who made every decision with terrifying independence is operating inside a framework that isn't entirely his own, then the people watching from outside the gates of Jupiter Island are right to feel the quiet, persistent unease they clearly feel. The story isn't finished. Tiger Woods' stories never are. He has a gift, among all his many gifts, for defying every ending the world writes for him. Maybe he'll do it again. Maybe he'll look up one day, clear-eyed and certain, and decide what he wants, and then go and get it with the same precise and devastating focus that made him the most dominant player the sport has ever seen. Or maybe the most important battle Tiger Woods ever faces won't be on a golf course at all. It'll be for the simple, radical, underrated thing that greatness so often costs people in the end. The right to just be himself. If this documentary-style storytelling is what you come here for, real stories told with real depth about real human beings navigating impossible circumstances, subscribe to this channel. Not because the algorithm asks you to, but because this kind of storytelling takes time and care and a belief that the people in these stories are worth understanding fully. That's what we're here to do, and we need you with us to keep doing it.